Hello, I'm Perrin Woods, and this is A Walk in the Woods. This is a podcast we like to release on some sort of schedule where we each bring in a topic that we research and teach it to each other and our listeners. I am here with Leo.
Hi.
Elliot.
Yo, what's up?
And Nalin.
Hello there.
So, what have you brought for us today, Nalin?
Oh, I brought a very interesting little study, and the article that I got on this is very well titled, "Hide Your Phone When You're Trying to Work." Seriously.
Seriously.
So,
it wasn't serious until they clarified.
Yeah, you know?
It was just a joke. It was like, put your phone away.
You rascal.
No, seriously. Oh. Put your phone away. You're going to die.
Oh. Anyways,
oh boy, okay, that got serious fast. Well, that's the title of the article. Okay, so, while, it might seem a bit extreme to do this, but, you might want to lock your phone away in a drawer or another room, and learn to work without it. Because having it in the room apparently seriously lowers your available cognitive ability.
Even having it just face down on a table.
Yeah, you need to have it out of sight.
So
out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Wait, so it affects even if you're not looking, even if you're not using your phone. How does it affect you?
So, I was gonna get to that, but basically, it affects you because you're constantly worrying about, what am I missing? What's going on? Is that a notification I just heard? It takes, and even the actual ability to ignore it takes up brain power. So, and it's linked to the more you use it, the worse that is. So the more brain power it actually takes up, just having it there. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Unless you don't have any friends and you're not missing anything.
Well, me. But even just
browsing social media, I'd imagine Reddit or something.
Oh no, but also just daily stuff. I have to go do. It sends you a notification that you have to go do something. That kind of thing. Even just ignoring that.
So what if you turn all your notifications off? Does that help much, or is it still a problem?
I mean, that helps, but that's more of a first step,
right?
Because, like I said, it's ignoring it that is part of the problem. Yeah. So it's, to quote from the University of Texas at Austin, and I quote, "We're automatically drawn to it." So
I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Just
me too.
Everybody in my life.
So the problem becomes. I'm still quoting here, by the way, and so now the problem becomes not to figure out what to pay attention to, but resisting that automatic pull. You actually have to devote some of your cognitive resources to resisting. End quote.
Well, no, and I feel like it should be not trying to resist, we don't want to, damn, I just lost my train of thought,
See, and that's what your phone does.
Read back what you were saying, just the beginning of that, about ignoring it, just that, read that back real quick, because then, not the entire thing, but just
Just the quote, so, where'd it go? I had it here a second ago.
Well, it was something about ignoring.
Yeah, basically ignoring it actually takes brain power. That's kind of the gist.
Why are we focusing on trying to ignore it and trying to know what to ignore? Then why aren't we focusing on when to not use it? I'm seeing a lot of people. I've heard stories about people using their phone at work when doing their homework, stuff like that. Why don't people realize that it's something that they have to put aside?
So, well,
That
I
did
think
not-
I think some of it is societal, but I also think
Right.
that like I don't know, it doesn't really go over it in the article that I have of like why we don't realize this, but I think some of it's societal, and also some of it is just attachment to knowing what's going on in the world.
Right.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Because those notifications, they tell you what's going on
The,
on different
the
apps.
24-hour news stream.
Yeah,
Too. Yeah.
yeah.
Like New York Times gives you notifications. You're always trying to figure out what's going on with the Mueller probe. Am I right?
Yeah, no, pretty much.
Very relatable.
We always need to be connected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's at this point, it's just kind of become
Right.
a necessity.
And you
Bare necessity.
I'm so done with you.
Can
yeah,
we
because
not
you
get copyrighted?
because you kind of lose your attention span.
Hey,
I mean,
what's up?
Yeah, but
That's segue.
that's a whole nother
That's okay.
Actually,
Go
we-
go and
discussion
go
is
and
attention
listen to
span.
that.
Actually, we discussed this in last
Oh,
week's.
Oh, yeah,
episode.
we
If you-
did.
Yeah.
If you want to go and rewatch, listen to that.
So
If it ever gets edited.
if it, yes,
Whoa!
jeez, okay.
Don't date that.
But another bit of the study was that the moment a device enters your proximity, even if you don't actually own that device, your cognitive ability starts to decline. So just being in the presence of another device starts eating away at your brain.
Wait, so does this mean like if you're working on a laptop, that the fact that you are working on a laptop?
So
actually-
I'm getting to laptops.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's laptops are actually very different, and it's interesting. Let's see. So there was. So actually, I'll just go right into laptops now if I can find where I put this. Another study found that students who were taking notes in a lecture hall for their classes in college. Students who didn't have a laptop to work on in that environment were actually negatively affected simply by being in the presence of someone else's laptop. So while the laptop itself might not actually
Wow.
really hurt you in terms of working on it in that environment, you inadvertently might hurt someone else.
Oh, right. Yeah, because is it like the actual distraction? Because like, if I see like a technology, like if I see like technology, like a phone or like a laptop, like it, I don't see how. And if I'm focusing on my own notes, like how can this like affect me if even if I see it? Because I'm not really paying attention to it, right? I'm paying attention to the class. That's what I wonder.
Yeah. So I think in that kind of a situation where it's you're taking notes on it
Right.
for a class, the person actually taking the notes isn't necessarily adversely affected by it. But if you're doing it on paper and somebody else has this screen right next to you, you're going to be constantly like, ooh, what's that? Because it's bright, it's right there, and it's in the corner of your eye.
Right. And
It's
you know,
in your peripherals.
Yeah.
also what I've heard from like a lot of my teachers is that when you get to college, it's a better idea to take notes on paper than on the computer because you will actually remember things. I've
Yeah,
heard
right.
more.
So that's actually
You-
an entirely different study because there's a drawn connection between
Writing something.
between writing something versus
just-
typing something.
right, because you
Tapping.
can
Yeah,
ma-
you
maybe
actually,
it's that
like-
like you can feel like the words you have to
That's
you
what
have
it
to
is.
look you have to watch it, you have to watch the
Here's
sentence as you
something
write
else
it.
that I'd like that I think actually might be something interesting. I wonder if there's also an evolutionary side to that. Like that might be where typing is in like a couple thousand years if it sticks around as like something that we do on occasion, because we've been writing things for thousands of years, right? That's kind of how humans have essentially evolved quickly
Right.
in our knowledge base, because we have like we have this wonderful ability that to pass on information between generations, and that's
Right.
been done through writing and speaking. And I think that it's not just a lucky coincidence that writing and speaking something back that we're trying to learn ingrains it more in our memory. Like, I think that that's something that has been developed. If it didn't develop from doing that, maybe that already is why that's writing or like storytelling developed.
Yeah.
That's just my take on that.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, I kind of, a lot of times I prefer notes. It's just it's fun, you know. It's I don't know. It's fun to write something and kind of like feel yourself understanding it.
It's more tactile.
Yeah.
Right. And it also takes more work, because the thing about creating like really good notes is that you have to listen to what, like, the speaker, if you're in a lecture, you have to like listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then put it through your mind and process it, rather than taking your computer out and just copying exactly what they say and never going back to it. By actually understanding it and writing it down, you're actually learning more. And it feels like through this, I kind of wonder if the use of technology like laptops to take notes and to study and things like that, I wonder if it's affecting overall the comprehension of people and even the grades of people or something when it comes to school, because you can, of course, this is a very complicated thing when it comes to looking at a whole class and seeing how they do in different classes, but it's really interesting, you know, because I feel like it can affect overall how you like take in what you're listening to, you know.
Yeah. I love how passionate Leo just got about that. That was amazing.
I love look. I even have a notebook in front of me, guys. See, y'all have no.
I printed out my notes before.
Yeah, but you printed out typed notes.
Get it? And look at Nalin. Look at Nalin looking at his phone. I'm
His
just kidding.
phone.
I'm just throwing shade
like-
to everybody, honestly.
But I really like what you were saying, and I can tell you right now, I can type faster than I
Right.
write, but
Same.
But for like,
Same.
you know, I really like writing with like my favorite pen on a piece of lined paper.
I mean, we
But,
know this about
I mean,
Nalin.
it's
I
also
think-
something that we're here. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's an important thing, because you have to like think about what's going on with the speaker, and you have to somehow, because you know, we are faster typers than we are writers. We have to somehow shorten down the notes so we can still get everything that's important, and I think that helps us remember it. And I think that's a huge benefit to taking notes physically, like writing it down, not typing.
Because you're also forcing yourself to know exactly what like abbreviations mean.
Right.
So-
Yeah. You're also learning how to, you know, spell things out and stuff.
Yeah.
If you're in like a certain, like if you're in a class that grades a lot with grammar, you know, it's important to know, you know, exactly how to spell things.
Right.
Especially because, you know, my history teacher told me about his experience in college when it was like one of his first classes, and he sat down and the lecturer just started lecturing without any like visual aid, and he had no idea how to like get down the information.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like if you don't have a visual aid, you can't see how things are spelled. You kind of have to I kind of have to figure out how to take notes in a meaningful way as well, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions. One thing is bouncing off right what Leo said was, I wonder if taking notes on computers is something that like impacts your ability to spell and like use grammar more effectively, because one of the huge advantages of a computer is that there's automatic spell checkers. All you have to do is right click and bam,
Yeah.
write things there. Is that something that we get used to, or do we actually learn from it's like, oh, it's actually spelled like that? That's one question I have.
Well, I think my experience with spell checkers is when it's not on my phone and it's not that instant like automatic replacement stuff, when it's on the computer and it underlines it, I think I've learned I've actually learned from that.
I mean,
Yeah, because it underlines it, and then you can go back and manually fix it, or you can right click it, and if you
Right.
realize that it's just like a letter out of place, then you start to learn it. But if it's like the full word is wrong, then that's
right.
kind of where
and
that starts
also,
to fall out.
also,
but-
if you're writing on paper and you write something wrong, if you write something like if you spell something incorrectly, there's
You
no
don't-
red line.
You don't
Yeah.
get
So you
immediate
might
feedback.
not know how it's actually spelled, and therefore you have a habit of writing things wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, my spelling is absolutely atrocious. I'm horrible. I hate writing. I
How do you
hate
spell
everything
atrocious?
about it. And I would say I have learned how to spell certain more complex words through spell check.
Yeah.
But in general, I'm still a really, really bad speller. So I would say it may not be as useful as people are thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
So I'm going to move on to my second question here. So to me, I think a lot of a distraction of like taking notes with a laptop is that if you have a traditional laptop, you have the screen in front of you and a keyboard. My question would be, if you are essentially trying to emulate paper with a laptop, where either you are typing onto an on-screen keyboard that is below you, like a flat
Like a
surface,
2-in-1.
like a 2-in-1 or like a or
like an
like a
iPad or
tablet with
something,
a
yeah.
keyboard on it, or you have some way to write with to write digitally, is that going to have the same attention tampering effect, or
Yeah.
do you think it's going to that's going to be more effective?
That's actually a really interesting question because
the screen is no longer blocking.
Yeah,
vision.
because like writing, not only that, but like what we kind of got off topic into about writing versus typing, does writing digitally have the same effect as writing on paper, or is it closer to typing in like how your brain
right.
This would be a
remembers
great
the
study.
information?
I feel like people have
We
done
can
this. But
do a follow up or something?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like do it specifically with this.
I think this is interesting. Like, I feel like the glowing of the screen is still going to distract you. You know, like what you were saying,
Right.
if the
Yeah.
person's laptop's in your peripheral. I feel like that's still going to somehow affect you. If you have something, though, like a Kindle or like an e-reader
Where
that
it
has...
uses-
Oh yeah, where it's like the e-ink screens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that might have the same effect.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if this is true or anything, but that might be.
I totally agree with that. I find that, to me, ebooks, I love the fact that they're available, but I really dislike trying to read them on a phone or a computer.
Oh my God,
because-
yeah.
No, it's a
Agreed.
glaring white. It is not
Right.
not like the nice thing of a book, and that's why e-readers like that, to me, are really quite nice. I would imagine that. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it is just the glowing of the pixels. It's something unavoidable about using a device that maybe that sort of device would
But
fix.
this has to do with another thing that I don't want. I mean, this is just kind of a different thing about like, does reading on a screen, like if you read a book on a screen, and then if another person reads a book in the paperback version, you know, on paper, does that affect how they enjoy it, but also how they comprehend the information? If it's some kind of study, like you know, reading things in paper, maybe printing things out. I feel like you have the chance to highlight things and maybe understand them a little better, but you know, it also has to do with reading. You know how you comprehend the information, if it's on a bright screen or if it's on paper.
So, like, I've used a Nook before, one of the old ones, but it still had like an e-ink screen. It wasn't one of the actual tablet ones. And it's much more, for me at least, it's much more enjoyable to read a book on normal paper. But I don't think it really affected my comprehension of what was actually going on in the story. It was more just kind of a different experience.
To me, that's what I think when it's like reading something like an article or something that you are going to have to read that digitally. To me, I think that I comprehend that as much as a physical article, and really it's just more about the enjoyment of reading it. Like,
Right.
it may not be as enjoyable to read it off like a white screen, but I think that it's going to you're not going to understand it that much differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I've got one more thing, and then Nalin, I want to hear if you've got anything. Actually, do you have anything else on this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant now, but
Irrelevant.
the article also goes into like some tips of how like you can minimize this and like keep your phone away from you.
I mean, I think
stuff,
that those things are kind of self-evident. Just put your phone in a different room.
but
or-
pretty much mute it, put it in a different room, lock it in that room, and don't touch it while you're working. That's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
Just to yeet that
I
out of there.
I have a kind of closing remark for this discussion. We grew up. We're growing up in an interesting time where
The age of
say that again.
technology.
where in our at least for me, I did not start technology. Modern technology has not been a big thing until like I was like. Like you didn't see the sort of thing where it's like, let's put iPads in kindergarten classrooms.
Oh yeah.
I did not interact with technology in like in a educational environment.
Same.
In the way that it is today with like the 1-to-1 Chromebook thing at our school. I didn't interact with that until like 3rd grade when we had iPads, and even
Oh, yeah.
then,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't-
even then it's still a lot of like printed out stuff. We learned to write cursive.
Well,
Oh.
I
learned a little.
I didn't. We had like
Yeah.
a 6-week unit on it, and then it was never mentioned again.
Yes,
and
we
weren't-
didn't really use
We
it.
weren't
That-
expected to retain.
That's a
any
whole different.
information.
That's a whole different topic. Is
Yeah,
cursive.
because
Yeah,
I would
that's-
love to
that's
have
something
nice cursive handwriting.
Completely different. What I'm trying to ask with this is this sort of thing where we each like we said that we enjoy just writing on paper, like an enjoyable thing. Is that going to continue, or my question is, in a couple years, like with technology spreading more and more, like let's say like people who are being like born this year, when they go to elementary school and once they do all that stuff, is writing still going to be that much big of a role, or is typing going to slowly take over?
Right,
Like,
because, like,
that's my question.
You know, I learned, like, when I was a kid, I did that thing when you have like the letters and you have
yeah.
to like read something and like react to it, and like you go through this whole all these grades of writing. And my
Yeah.
question is, like, is it going to be that like in a decade or two, is kind of typing in different forms using computers, is that going to kind of replace a large portion of how we learn? And if so, what are the negative effects of that? And also, are there any like positive
Yeah,
effects?
I think that it's the sort of thing. We learn to write before we learn to type. Will it become the sort of thing where you learn them synonymously, or even learning to type before learning to write?
But I mean,
I know
there's also like, from my experience, and this might have just been my experience, but when I was going through elementary school, and they were like teaching us to write and stuff, they taught us how to write. They didn't really teach us spelling at all, and they didn't really teach us typing either. They were just kind of like, oh, here, okay, you've assumedly learned it. Move on to the next thing.
Right.
And I think that in the American education system, they need to change that.
I think that's a separate discussion.
But that
Yeah,
is
that's-
a
that's a whole
separate
different
discussion.
thing.
yes.
We've gone far with this.
Yes,
with this
all right.
topic.
We
I
got
really like this one.
That was
Yeah.
really good.
Because we really
yeah.
got into a meaningful conversation that I think
Yeah.
affects. I mean, I haven't really thought about this too deeply, and I think that this kind of format of talking to each other, I think it kind of helps bring up those concepts.
I want to give Leo the MVP for that discussion because of how
Yes.
passionate
Hey,
he was and how
honestly,
amazing.
Perrin and Nalin, y'all get it, y'all. That was inspiring.
That
Yeah.
was hella nice.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
topic.
Of
Now,
course.
let's move on. So,
Yes.
I asked you
That's a
this.
good segue.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
I asked
King
you
of
this
segues.
before this. I asked all of you, like, do you know what game theory is?
And it was like the YouTube channel. I do.
Yeah.
Not the YouTube channel.
So the game. I'm gonna give you like a little overview of game theory, and I'm thinking that we'll get into a bit of a discussion here about it.
Okay.
So, I'll give you a preface. Game theory is basically the study of games. But here's the thing. Games are everywhere. There are so many things that you can apply as a game.
What do you mean?
Literally, evolution itself.
Relationships.
No,
No.
evolution, relationships, not in a romantic sense, but just between people and animals. It can all be interpreted as a game, and game theory is about how to win that game.
Whoa.
With that saying,
Got it.
let's go into like a couple of these
Sing the Pokemon theme song.
Let's just
Don't at
jump
me, bro.
into it.
I just did.
here. I'm gonna go through a couple of like game types as sort of a preface. So, these are gonna jump a little bit over the place, but one thing.
First-person shooter, live-action role play.
No.
Real-time strategy.
First, you want to look at competitive versus non-competitive games. Sorry, cooperative, not competitive, but it kind of works in the same way. So, the way that this is defined is actually quite interesting. Cooperative games are possible if commitments can be formed between people that are externally enforced. A cooperative game it's not necessarily a cooperative game if the only enforcement is you and this other person saying that you will cooperate. That is not inherently a cooperative game because how is that being enforced? It's just between you two. It's not a external thing, and because there's no sort of rule like you might see in a game that, like, yeah, you have to work together, that would be externally enforced. But if there's no rule against it, you're free to stab them in the back, essentially. That was interesting when I was looking at it. So that's one thing. I'm not going to go in depth much in any of these. This is just brief prefaces. And then you've got non-cooperative. This is focusing on, like, basically an individual's actions and payoffs. That's what people are studying when looking at non-cooperative games. This also looks at this thing called Nash equilibria, which is basically where both players of a game are playing to the best that they can, and they've learned everything possible about their opponent's strategy. Basically where there is no way for the player themselves to improve. It's essentially like they're making literally the best decisions that are possible given the situation.
Okay.
And it's like if you were to set an AI to say, okay, employ the best strategy to your knowledge, and you're going to get the same result from a game every time if that's what's happening. So now we're going to talk about symmetric versus asymmetric games.
This
is
getting
interesting. So
That's spicy.
So basically, symmetric versus asymmetric, symmetric games have payoffs for certain strategies based on only the other strategies employed, and not who is playing them. Like, this comes into the idea of, like, if you have a very simple game, it's just about the strategies. You can have a computer do this, you can have a person do this. It should be essentially the same. The games are designed where it's supposed to be the same. An example of this, here I've got a few, is Chicken, where you basically, it's a very simple game if you think about it. It's run, and then it's stop, the person who stops sooner. And really, there's a strategy to it. It's about outthinking your opponent. It's really just thinking of when to stop. And you can almost, with a lot of the games, you can simplify them to a very simple 4x4 square, where each player has essentially two choices. And I'll go to the prisoner's dilemma for this. So the prisoner's dilemma, a bit of a backstory to it, is basically two people are convicted prisoners. They're set in rooms and they're offered a choice. If you confess, and the other person does not and the other person confesses, you both will have a reduced sentence.
Okay.
If the other person confesses but you don't, you walk free, but the other person has a life sentence. This is just an example. Basically, I'm saying that they lose, you gain. If they both don't confess, they have less of a sentence than they would if they both do confess. The goal is basically, how do you best do it? It's obvious that let me give you my explanation here. It is strategically best for both people to not confess, because if you aren't confessing, then you have the chance to gain from it. Whereas if you're confessing, I think I did it wrong. Basically, if they both confess, they have a reduced sentence. Basically, the idea is that you have a chance at a bit greater score if you confess, but if the other person doesn't confess, you can lose from it. Strategically, the best choice for both people is always to confess. There is no reason to not confess in this situation, essentially, because if you confess, there's a big chance to gain. I explained that kind of badly.
Well,
So
it's good enough. Basically, if you don't confess, then you're screwed. But if you do confess, if both confess, then you get a reduced sentence, which is good. But if one confesses and one doesn't, then one goes free.
If both
It's like,
don't confess, they actually have like a better score.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
if you decide to cooperate, essentially you'll both get it, but you have no guarantee that you'll cooperate. And so if one person tries to cooperate by not confessing and the other confesses, then I got it wrong, where the confessor is actually the one who will get more out of this.
yeah.
Okay. Wow, this is it. I feel like it could cause a lot of stress, you know.
Oh yeah.
This is like a very, because like you have no idea what the other is thinking.
But this is where that idea of non-cooperative games comes into play, and the equilibria thing. There is always a better choice. If you think about it, you should always confess. You should always attempt to get that thing that is more selfish. Even though you both will gain minimal, it's better to gain that minimal and have the chance at getting more than to both gain slightly more. Like that is, from an individual perspective, the correct way to play the game. Now the thing here that's interesting is that this is where you get stuff about cooperation coming into effect. And I'll talk about that later in this.
You know what this reminds me of?
Yeah.
Schrodinger's cat.
Pretty
A little bit.
A bit, yeah.
So, I have it up here. So there's prisoner A, prisoner B.
Yeah.
You can either betray or confess.
Mhm.
So let's say they're each sentenced to a year and a half
Okay.
in jail. If A and B each betray each other, each of them serves 2 years. So they get a worse punishment than they
Right.
were actually.
Wait,
gonna get.
betray each other? Does that mean one of them confesses and the other
No,
doesn't?
they both.
They're both
they
trying
both.
to confess.
They're both trying to make the other person out
Right.
to be who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a better version.
Oh,
of it.
so
I'm
they're
sorry, I
like,
was
so they're
explaining it
like,
that way.
you did it,
Yes.
Yeah,
and then they're
they're-
like,
they
okay,
did it.
then the other person who, you know,
So if
will
they,
serve more time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If A betrays B, but B remains silent, A will be set free, and B will serve 3 years in prison, and vice versa.
Oh,
So if
okay.
if B betrays A and A stays silent, same thing. If A and B both remain silent, both of them will only serve 1 year in prison on lesser charge.
And here's what
So-
game theory says. Game theory says you both should always try and betray. It is
Yes.
to your advantage to always betray.
Yeah.
Because but okay, so let me get this right. If they both betray, if they both go behind each other's backs and
They
say
will get a slightly
you did it, they will both
have
get.
a greater sentence by slightly.
Yes.
So why is that smart?
Because if you try to stay silent, if the other person betrays, you severely lose and they win.
Right.
The reason that you want to go for that is because there's the greatest possible victory. Basically,
okay.
because the possibility for a payoff is guaranteed to be the greatest there, you want to play into that strategy according to game theory. If you do not know the other person, if you have got no sort of connection, it's not an individual-based thing.
Right.
That's what I mean. That's like the symmetric idea.
'Cause
is
if you-
that it's
yeah.
only about the strategy. The winning strategy is always betray.
Right, and this is like if you put yourself in this situation and try to think your way through it, it's so difficult because you keep going in like a pattern of trying to understand what you should do. Your first instinct is probably betray, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you
Yeah.
want to get out. But if you say I'm not going to betray, then you might think that the other person is going to betray you, which makes you want to betray. So I think that it might be that it's kind of a thing that people go to both betray.
And this is interesting to me because game theory has been used to understand cooperation between people, because in many senses, if you're looking at the prisoner's dilemma, it is much like, if you're looking at things from a game theory perspective, it's better to do things a lot of things. It's better to do like what you would think is the worst thing for potentially more gain. Like this is why it's been used to study like ethics and things. And I will get into that a little bit more. I've got a little bit more to go through. So that is, I'll go back to the prisoner's dilemma and some of these
Okay.
examples. That's symmetric. Asymmetric is where the players have different winning strategies. It's the same where it doesn't matter who the individual who's playing them, but they've got just like different different strategies. So like there's a game called the Ultimatum game, and there's also a game called the Dictator game. You can kind of extrapolate what this is out of them. But basically, one player is going to have more power essentially than the other. So there's different winning strategies here.
Okay.
So next you've got zero-sum games. These are a lot of some different like traditional games. These ones you'll know better. These are games where you cannot have. There's a total amount of resources and they cannot be changed. You're not gonna just one gain and the other not gain anything. Like example is like poker or Go or chess. In poker, for you to gain money, someone has to lose money. There's not just a gaining of money from out of nowhere. There's an exchange. Someone loses for you to gain.
Okay.
That is zero-sum games, and they're pretty actually simple when it comes to game theory things. People like to focus on non-zero-sum games, where gains by one player do not have to correspond to another's loss, such as the prisoner's dilemma, where someone only really loses when, like, there's only gain to loss when one betrays and one doesn't.
Okay.
So, here, these games often correspond with each other, and this is where we'll get simultaneous versus sequential. These are more like variables, essentially, to define games. So simultaneous games are where people move essentially simultaneous. You do not know the other person's action until you've already completed your action. Basically, it's essentially simultaneous. You will not have any idea what they're doing, and they will not have any idea what you're doing. That is like the prisoner's dilemma. You don't know until the very end.
Right.
These you can often predict based on payoff matrices. Like they're harder to predict mathematically compared to sequential games.
Yeah.
Which is later players have information about earlier players' actions. These are games like chess, like something like chess or checkers. You will know what the other person's actions are because it's turn-based. These you can actually just calculate with decision trees, essentially.
Right, okay.
Because there's going to be, like, they did this action. You can
respond
in this way.
Decision A will lead to decision B, which will inadvertently lead to decision C, yada,
Exactly.
yada, yada.
You will know what they've done, and so that you can make an active decision on it rather than simultaneous where there's less knowledge, and it makes it like that. That's actually something that makes games that we will play for fun. If you think about it, you either have to make a complicated turn-based game, or you can do less complicated simultaneous games.
Okay. And you know, this is interesting because sorry, this kind of reminds me of what it would be like to be like a person in power, like a person, maybe like a president or like a leader of a state. Making those decisions must be incredibly difficult because, right, you have to find a decision that is the most advantageous for the most people.
Game theory is really interesting, not just because we like to play games and it's interesting to see how mathematically they work, but because game theory applies to a lot of life and it's super cool about it. I'm going to get to that, but it applies to economics and political science as well as others. It's really interesting. There's also perfect versus imperfect information. And this is quite close to the simultaneous and turn-based, essentially, where perfect information is like chess, checkers, tic-tac-toe. You know everything that your opponent knows at all times on those.
Right.
Imperfect information are games like poker or bridge. Even if it is turn-based, you do not know all that your opponent knows, and this is another thing that is important in turn-based games. If you want to make a turn-based game interesting, essentially, you can argue that it's much better to use imperfect information because you're going to have to try and predict that rather than perfect information, where that makes it much more finite. I don't know. Like tic-tac-toe, you know how if everyone's playing perfectly, it always ends in a cat's game, right?
Yeah.
That's basically a great example of this. There's a winning strategy that you can always employ, and tic-tac-toe is based on human mistake. Like, it's a simple enough game that you can learn it quickly and realize how to essentially break it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I say something? The game Pitch, very similar to Bridge, right? Everybody gets 6 cards, and you bid depending on what you have in your hand.
Right.
You have to bid, like, you have to be very smart about it.
Yeah.
There are 4 points in a hand. You can get the high, low, jack of trump, all these of the Trump suit, not our president, and then the points, which is face cards and tens. So each face card has their respective thing, and then tens are worth 10. So even if you're playing with a very large amount of people, we were playing with 7 yesterday, me and my family. People will bid assuming that the jack is out of the deck, because there will be cards left over no matter what.
Right.
You have to plan out, like, so if you bid 4, you get extra points, but you have to have the jack. You have to have everything that you can. And it's very similar, I would say, to something like Bridge or Poker. And it's very interesting, the bidding strategies of people when they play.
I mean, most card games are imperfect information games, where it's based on the idea that you do not know your opponent's hands, even though you're playing in a turn-based sense.
Yeah.
I'll get onto like all these things. This is just like a little information so that we can better extrapolate from how this is applied. So finally, we've got like 2 more types that I'm gonna go a little in depth on. Is combinatorial, which is basically, it makes finding an optimal strategy difficult through the multiplicity of moves, like chess and Go. Chess, the reason that it's difficult to know a winning strategy and why we can make computers that are going to win easier than us is because there's a humongous number of moves that the game and plot uses. That multiplicity makes it hard for humans when there's that many choices. But
algorithmically for computers, it's a lot easier.
I'm going to get to this as well, but AI and such can be used to sort of outthink these in more linear games like those, where it's perfect information and it's turn-based. You can easily employ a winning strategy based on just based on knowing everything.
Right.
And that's where, again, you reach that equilibria, the term that we used earlier, where if everyone knows everything possible, everyone's playing the optimal strategy, it's going to be almost identical results every time.
So here's the thing. I don't know a lot about like technology, and I also don't know a lot about chess. But I don't know anything. Okay,
I'll play you sometime. Chess is fun.
Well, I mean, I would lose. Okay. Here's what I don't understand. I wonder if there is a supercomputer that anybody has built that can outbeat anyone. That can beat anybody.
That actually was one of the bigger supercomputers made. One of the first.
There's a chess. You can play against an AI that will always beat you in chess.
They built one of the first AI. I'll let Elliot say that.
Yes, I would like to say this because this is really interesting to me. There was somebody who is pretty good at chess, and they made a computer algorithm to beat the world's best chess player, but that person can't beat the world's best chess player, and it's so interesting how this person can program a computer to beat the best person at chess, but they can't beat that person.
And it's because it's so hard to hold literally every possible move in your head, whereas a computer can do it with ease.
Yeah, because a computer, it'll take
can
each
calculate
possible
literally a game from every possible move. It can think. Like, if he moves here are literally every game that can stem from that.
Okay, it's like
millions.
It's all it all has to do with math if you think about it. The percentages, there's the percent chance that somebody is going to play this.
Is all about predicting stuff with math.
Right. And finding the higher maybe if somebody makes one move and then you're going to say, okay, there's a 60% chance that this person will move from here to there. If they move from here to there, I have a set of possible moves I can make to change what happens, meaning maybe I can stop them from them making that move, and then from there pick out the one that best makes sense analytically,
Right.
when it comes to percentages.
So going back to our game definitions now, I'll let you talk. The interesting thing is, because it's perfect information, there's not even a chance. You know what action they've made, and you can play a game based on that action.
Right.
But also in chess specifically, it's like the amount of moves that the best chess players can be. I think they call them grandmasters.
I think, yeah.
Top 500.
More like the top 10 in the world. They can hold. Okay, all right.
Joke about Overwatch.
I know.
It was like, I know.
But they can hold up. I think it's like up to, I think it's between 9 and 13 moves that they want to make based on the other person's moves in their head. And the average person can do around 5.
Computer can do so much.
But the computer,
And
computer
especially
can literally
fast,
see
too.
every single move that it wants to make based off of every single move that you make.
Yeah.
Like, the cool thing to
if you've
me-
ever watched war games, it's it's kind of like that. I'm not going to say anything more, but if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But basically how computers do it is it runs a mini simulation of what it wants to make in order to beat you,
Right.
based off of every move.
I'm going to try and speed this up
Okay,
a little
yeah.
because I'm not completely done and we're
Yeah.
already like a bit
Behind.
But
Sorry,
basically,
my fault.
like, it's fine.
Well, no, it's both.
Yeah.
These are-
It's all of our
The
fault.
interesting thing is,
These are both 25-minute.
No, these are really good discussions.
Yeah.
like
Fun.
insanely
It's
skilled
amazing.
people at chess. They can think a couple moves ahead for a couple different strategies.
Okay.
A computer literally can think every single potential
That's crazy.
game ahead. Like, it's insane.
Also, they can go really fast. Like,
Oh, yeah.
imagine if you
Gotta go
if-
fast.
Modern computers can do it.
Like finding a way to make it so fast. You know those people who play the chess and they hit the speed button.
Oh yeah.
They do the
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about? Like a computer that would be able to respond to that so quickly.
Instantaneously.
That crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Couple milliseconds.
Yeah, so AI can have been created recently to address perfect and also imperfect information games, because those can be predicted too, that you can create winning strategies. AI have even been created to do much more complicated things. I'm going to use an example. Elon Musk, I think like 2 years ago, asked a company, hey, make a self-learning AI that will beat professional players at this game, Dota 2. They did it in
I heard about that.
in 6 months. They created an AI that was able to compete and beat the best
Wow.
players in the world, and that AI created entirely new strategies itself that players previously hadn't used. It really shows off how we are advancing technologically, how we're able to create these AI that can predict these winning strategies that are insanely difficult to do with math if you're a normal human.
Perrin, are you ready for the machine takeover?
You guys,
yeah.
you know, it'd be a really scary dystopian sci-fi
Yeah.
movie, right?
Terminator.
It's it's a world where the
You have
the,
to
the
beat
leader,
a computer at chess to survive.
okay, so imagine this: like the leader of the state is a computer, and that computer makes decisions based on like
Game theory.
Based on game theory,
Yeah.
like because that sounds like a. And then the computer it starts to become self-aware, and it starts to gain power.
And then we use game theory itself to beat
Guys,
the
I have my
computer.
new
Ooh.
award-winning book.
All
Buy
right.
it now.
I love that. I'm gonna keep going because I want to
Okay,
get through
I'm
this.
taking the idea. I'm copywriting it. You
So
can't have it.
There's also
We'll
that-
co-write it.
because mathematics are cool. There's an idea of infinitely long games. It exists in mathematical theory, but it's the idea that a winner is unknown until all of the moves are completed. So after infinitely number of moves, there's a winner. It's kind
makes
of
sense.
it's kind of weird and hard to think about. Like
What?
someone does win, but after infinite moves.
What? But that doesn't make
You've
sense.
just
It's
broken
math.
my mind.
It's math.
Mathematically, it does actually make sense
Mm-hmm.
because it takes X number of moves for there to be a definitive outcome.
But what
So
if it's
you-
chess?
So
there
What
can
if
be
it's
an
chess
infinite
and if
number
you
of
take-
moves.
If you
We're talking a game like chess does not work.
Yeah,
We're
but
talking
like-
about a game where there's not a finite amount of
Yeah.
moves.
So
Almost-
it can literally take an infinite amount
of
of
time.
moves
That's
and time
crazy.
to get a definitive answer.
Nobody will ever know.
Well, math. Here's the thing: all of the games we play, everything that we apply,
Elliot's mind broke.
it is finite. There is not an application other than mathematically of an infinitely long game.
Yeah.
Everything that we're talking about is finite, no matter how long it might be.
Actually, you know what? Because there are games like baseball and cricket that can technically go on forever.
But there is a way to employ
there is
winning
a
strategies.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, like-
but if
it's
you
like a
if
time
you
limit.
changed a couple things, those games could literally go on forever. Because while you're supposed to have 9 innings in baseball, you can play overtime if there's a tie, and you can actually get to a point where it's 1-1.
I think that the thing about the idea is that, yes, you might have games where it's possible to have infinite moves, but if you have that equilibria,
Yeah.
you technically shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So there's a few other types that's like discrete, continuous, differential, and evolutionary. Differential and evolutionary are the slightly more important ones of those, and these are different models of game theory, essentially. But let's go on to how game theory affects different fields. So game theory actually applies heavily in nature. You've got a lot of like animal behaviors and things about evolution where game theory applies. It helps explain evolution. An interesting application of it is someone used game theory to help suggest where 1-to-1 sex ratios come from. Like, why are there almost equal like numbers of female and male animals in most populations? And they use game theory to suggest that it comes through evolutionary forces. It is the best winning strategy. The most you will have the most possible number of like children and grandchildren if you have a 1-to-1 sex ratio.
I thought it was a 1-to-3 ratio for humans. I thought it was 3 males to every 1 female born. I thought that was the ratio.
What?
I don't.
No.
I don't know.
It's a 1-to-1 ratio.
It's
now.
nearly
Or
1-to-1.
that's the chances for, I don't know.
It's nearly 1-to-1. I believe it's like I believe there's like 1,000 more females in the world or something.
Okay,
I
I don't
forget
know.
exactly.
No, it is genetically almost 1-to-1.
Okay.
Nalin,
It's like it's
What?
technically like 49.999 something like that. Like this teeny tiny thing, but that's like that was one use of it. It was also used to explain emergence of animal communication. And that's where like this idea of cooperation in these things comes into play. It's really interesting. I didn't go too in depth through it, but cooperation becomes an important part of game theory. And there's also signaling games and communication games. Those are another part of this animal communication. And there's another one that I find really interesting. People literally used the game Chicken to explain fighting and territorial behavior in animals. They used chicken to explain chickens, if you think about it. Like that's really cool to me. They used this game that we created to basically apply it to animals.
Perrin, stop breaking my mind, please. Damn it.
So it's also been used
Mind
to
blown.
understand economic behaviors. Game theory is used a lot in modern business it's used to basically predict others and to just, have the best possible outcome. I'll give you an example. If you've got 2 companies that are fighting for something, let's say it's like 2 major movie companies that both own about 50% of the market. If one decides to make their movies a higher price and the other decides to make their movies a lower price, the one that has the lower price is going to win. It's like the prisoner's dilemma. If they both make it the lowest price, there's going to be less of a profit for them. But if they both make it high, it's going to be the most beneficial for both of them. But if one makes it high, one makes it low, low is going to profit the most. It's like that simple game that's like, oh, prisoner's dilemma, that's funny. It applies to this thing, and you can just imagine how often that sort of idea is used. It's really fascinating to me.
You're breaking my mind.
So you've said.
I am so like
Elliot doesn't exist anymore. He's become
absolutely
enlightened.
just like
His brain has become mush.
what? Yeah,
He's
this is
become
so...
God now. He's learned.
He,
I have
he has
ascended.
elevated.
Yes, he's
I have
about to come
ascended.
rising. Like
I'm the one above all.
It's just really cool to me how you've got these basic, you can have these 4 square games that literally apply to such complicated ideas. It's so cool to me.
everything's a game. If you think about it.
That is the idea of game theory.
Yeah.
Perrin's hair, which I'm looking at right now. Perrin's hair is a game. I don't know how to.
Perrin's hair is a mathematical concept.
So, a couple last things. It's also been used to develop theories of
Stop breaking
ethical...
my mind.
Game theory has also been used to create ideas on ethical and or normative behavior, and then like say like, oh yeah, this is why stuff should do. Like human ideas of morality, like that has game theory has been used to explain how they've come about, and like in animals as well. Like the fact that we cooperate, despite the fact that, you know, game theory says we should try not to cooperate.
Yeah.
Yet we cooperate anyways. How did that come about? That's the question that people like to ask, because even though it has an overall less advantageous outcome if both try to betray, there is a possible chance for more gain, and yet many humans and animals choose to cooperate because for the greater good. And the question is, why did we do that? It's interesting.
It is.
It's also this also has been used in political science, like I said that we would touch on, like in political economy, public choice, war,
Political
bargaining.
science is basically like
Game theory.
It's like 70% game theory.
Yeah, it's all game theory. It's about predicting things, and you can employ winning strategies. It's really neat. You can. It's also obviously used in logic and computer science, and it's also used in philosophy, like in studying common knowledge and coordination games. Like people have done like philosophical studies based on that. Also, Thomas Hobbes' ideas of morality from self-interest has come like they've used game theory to like look at that. And also ethics. That was something else. That's all that I have on game theory here. Do you guys have any more comments on this? I know that this is run.
Well, first of all,
you've broken my mind. I will not function as a human anymore. Secondly, how much did you know about this before going into it? Because it seems like you know a lot, like almost too much.
I mean, you could just read a
this.
Wikipedia article.
I'm gonna be honest. He just basically said what I did. I read a quick overview on Wikipedia. My definitions of each of the individual games. Most of those definitions just came from looking at it quickly on Wikipedia. I looked into a couple articles for the rest, like on some of the applications, but this is the basic stuff, and that's what's so neat to me about it. It's deceptively simple. These simple rules can like govern a lot of choices, but at the same time they don't when we think that they should, and that's why it's so interesting to study. It's like, why did cooperation, why is this thing? It is obviously advantageous in this way, but what caused it?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's basically like game theory is a game theory in a sense. It works, but not perfectly.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting, actually.
I love that your topic's actually I'm gonna segue part of it about cooperation into mine. But
Right.
We'll do that.
I just wanted to
After we've
say,
done,
after I just wanted to say, Perrin, I never thought math could be so interesting.
Wow.
Okay.
Leo's mind has been elevated, not quite blown, just elevated. He is now realizing the full potential of
I have
math.
become enlightened. All right.
Does he
All right.
still
I have
dislike
become-
algebra?
I
So-
become the
Sorry.
primordial soup. I'm just
You were the primordial soup before.
Okay.
You're just slightly sludgy now.
All right, I am so sorry for taking that long on that.
It's okay.
Oh no, it's
Perrin.
fine. It
I
was really
learned a lot.
interesting.
Now, after talking about how game theory impacts nature, let's transition into something about nature with Leo.
Bonsai.
What's that?
Bonsai.
Who's
What?
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 There's an
Say-
echo.
say what?
Bonsai. Y'all heard of bonsai?
Yeah.
Bonsai?
I used to want
Bonsai.
a little bonsai tree.
Me too. I love bonsai. Okay,
So tell us about them.
y'all, everybody at home, look up bonsai right now. Look
It's
up
a
on your
tree.
computer. Bonsai is
You can hug. No.
bonsai is an art. It's an Asian art, and it consists of mostly essentially potting a plant.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So,
But
that's it.
A
That's
bit
it,
more
guys.
complex than that.
All right, guys.
we're
that's
good.
it.
We're good.
All right, bye, guys. Okay. So first of all, let's get to the basics. What does bonsai mean? Well, it actually comes from a Chinese art, and it comes from a Chinese word actually. And there were some Japanese students who actually visited China, and they kind of started to take an understanding of what this art was, and they came back and they referred to it and they introduced it to Japan as or they kind of named it bonsai, which essentially just means like a potted plant, a plant in a pot. And so really what bonsai is taking a tree or a plant and putting it in a little pot and then nurturing it and making it so it just looks best. It's kind of a process that is an art. It's people specialize in this, but it's so much more, because if you look at a bonsai plant, it looks amazing, right? It looks like this little tree, right? If you take a tree and then you scale it down into this tiny thing that you can hold in your hands, the pot, but there are bigger ones that are literally like as tall as Nalin, right? And for all you people at home, that's pretty tall.
That's not that tall.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point.
Okay,
Leo.
so
Eventually.
so they can be very small or very large, but essentially what they look like. Imagine a tree, but you have the little roots, and then it goes up, and the branches can wind around into this really interesting pattern. The wood is warped kind of, and it creates these beautiful patterns.
So,
It really looks
So
how do they do that?
I just found
Yeah.
a really interesting bonsai, and I just want so I've watched videos on this about like the care of them,
Yeah.
and
Oh.
but I want you guys to see what they look
Yeah.
like. So this is one that's been extremely like treated crazy.
Wow.
Like, yeah,
Wait,
very
let me-
well.
Let me see that.
So to
It's-
give a little bit of a
Oh my god.
visual aid.
That is
or
like the
Can I see?
that is like a bonsai owner's dream right there.
So to
That's
give a
pretty-
little bit of an example,
all right.
imagine a combination between what's that African tree's name that has
Acacia.
Yeah, I think it's a combination between a couple acacia trees and an Ewok village, essentially. in its appearance.
Well, that's what the photo is, but like
Yeah.
there's a lot of different
Right.
versions of like how you do bonsai.
Anyways,
I'll
Leo,
let Leo get into
Tell
that.
me how you make a small bonsai tree.
All right, so I'm gonna explain it. So I watched a really cool video where a guy kind of walks through his first steps. So you're gonna take it like a small plant, right? And it usually starts very small. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take it out of the pot that it comes from. A lot of people trim off the little roots and take off a lot of the excess dirt, and then they repot it. And that's repotting actually happens a lot in bonsai, because bonsai trees are supposed to live for a very long time, and the best way to make these trees live a really long time is to repot it. So these roots, they don't kind of limit themselves. They're able to kind of make the tree continuously. You're trying to make sure that it continuously grows, the most healthily it can by trimming it. Trimming a lot of the roots and kind of regrowing them in a fashion in which they are the best they can be. So let's see.
Something
Yeah.
that I'd like to say. There's a very interesting thing. This is just to show how important like a bonsai tree is to people's culture. Is there's a traditional blacksmith who is extremely skilled, like one of the most skilled blacksmiths I've ever seen. He makes the bonsai grooming scissors, $35,000 scissors.
Yeah, they get
cow.
really.
They are
Jeez.
crazy. Like
They must be really sharp.
So this
He
is
spends so much time on them. They're extremely sharp, and they're very traditional.
well, no. This is so the thing about these shears is that they're kind of specialized in a really certain way. They're called like concave shears, and what they do is they're able to, when you cut, they're able to kind of hide that you have just cut something off of the tree and kind of make sure that it creates a kind of a smooth look. So there are a lot of different techniques. Right, so now that you've repotted it, a lot of people they trim it. So they trim all the branches. Sometimes they trim off the top and the little excess that you have, and then comes a technique called wiring. They take a piece of metal wire, and they're gonna wrap it around the branches, and this creates, over time, the tree kind of grows in a way that it kind of warps, and it kind of you're able to shape the tree. You're able to move this wiring so that eventually, over time, the tree takes the shape that you want it to take. And this has a lot of this takes a lot of technique. It takes a lot of training. You know, apparently to be an apprentice, as a person who is a bonsai artist, it takes 6 to 10 years of an apprenticeship.
Holy cow.
To do this. So it's
I'll take that. That sounds really nice.
But like apparently a lot of people try, but a lot of times like they kind of stop after a long time because it just takes so much dedication. These are cared for every day, right? And honestly,
It's like taking care of a dog.
right, it's
like
like
just a
taking
pet.
care of a baby. That's what people.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what people
it's
refer
more than
it
a
to.
dog.
Yeah, it's more.
It's-
Yeah.
It takes just extreme care, and I think this. I'm really drawn to this because I think it reflects like a lot of important values. It teaches the movement of time. It teaches about patience. You know, as a person who makes this kind of art, and it kind of, you know, it has to do with a little piece of nature. And you know, I really like a lot of potted plants and things like that, and a lot of like trees and things, because if you have them in your house, they kind of
Lighten up the room.
they represent
Liven it up.
something important. Thus, a walk in the woods, and we're surrounded by plants.
Now the thing is, now we need to change the drawing to a bonsai
A walk in the
tree.
bonsai.
A walk in the
Oh,
bonsai.
that would be the best.
Yo.
We're not changing the name
Yeah.
yet.
A walk in the bonsai. Leo's.
We're just changing it. It's not going to be woods. Welcome to Woods.
Welcome to Woods. I'm Perrin Woods. This is my solo podcast. That's it. Thank you. See you later.
So, anything else you have to tell us about bonsai?
Let's see. There's not too much. I didn't have too much about it, but
So Leo, is there anything else to keeping the bonsai small? Is there anything else to it than just cutting branches and the roots?
I think that's a lot of it. I think those are most of the techniques. I've seen a lot of brushing the wood with certain oils, but mostly when it comes to keeping the tree a compact size, a lot of it is shifting the shape so it's more compact, right?
I
So
see.
bringing it down, and a lot of times it's cutting off pieces and reforming them, and they get really big. A lot of them are giant, and these guys can live for thousands of years.
They become full-size trees if they're just like growing in the wild,
Right.
don't they? They're like
Yeah, and I've seen
normal-
these people who work with these bonsai trees. I've heard most of them say the same thing, that these bonsai trees are gonna live longer than you're gonna live. And some of these trees are inherited from other people, and so therefore you're kind of shifting something that has a giant importance. These things live for so long. How long do you have to live for?
Their legacy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important thing, because it's therapeutic, and it's kind of
It's like if you own a tortoise, it'll outlive you, so you leave it to your children.
I guess that's a good way of saying it.
Damn.
maybe raising a child. Maybe it's gonna live longer than you. Right?
Maybe.
Oh.
Aw.
That Leo,
Leo.
come on.
Hey, no, that was Perrin.
I said maybe.
Wait, no, you said maybe.
No, you said maybe.
You said maybe.
It's okay. It's
It's
fine.
okay. We'll
Wait,
go
I
over
don't-
it in the recording.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to.
Settle that later.
Yes.
So from something green and happy to something
jumping
very
back
gray
to
and
predicting
dark.
things,
Yeah.
Elliot, tell us
Jeez.
about solitary confinement.
Oh yeah. So we go from
That like that tree's
extremely
being
happy-
solitarily confined in a pot. No.
Hey.
Okay. Too
Okay,
bad. I'm sorry.
so-
I'll just go leave now.
So
Bye.
this was sparked from actually a school project that I'm doing. I hate that I'm saying that, but I'm like really interested in this.
Okay.
In school, I'm doing the mental effects of torture, and
Oh.
for this, yeah, with this, I wanted to focus in on solitary confinement. So I'll give a little bit of history
Okay.
and then explain what's going on and how horrible it is. So, solitary confinement was actually invented by Quakers in the 18th century. So they believed that the prisoners would take the time that they would have, 23 hours a day, to study the Bible and reflect on what they've done and reflect on how bad they have been. But even they realized that it was extremely inhumane and it was extremely damaging to these people.
And so they stopped.
So they stopped it.
Mhm.
Good
And this, I
Quakers.
believe the Supreme Court at the time, they were like, yeah, this is way too inhumane, and they stopped. Now,
They went back to making oats. I'm
Perrin.
sorry.
okay, so we are officially booting Perrin from the podcast. We
Don't
are
we?
now going to
Don't
be
you
a
guys
trio.
say this every episode?
Yeah,
Yes.
pretty much, because that's just what happens. 'Cause your jokes are just that bad.
So, with so yeah, so it's extremely inhumane, and people nowadays know that, but it's still not stopped. And the problem with it is there are nowadays 80 to 100,000 people in solitary confinement. Now the problem with this is humans. We are social, we are cooperative, just like with the game
Right.
theory thing. We thrive on being able to talk and communicate with each other, and that's how our species has thrived. And when you are
Right.
deprived of that, when you're in solitary confinement, you go insane. You go absolutely crazy.
Well, I mean,
You
it's
get-
changing your very nature of how you're supposed
Yeah.
to interact
Yeah.
with your environment.
You are put in a room that is sometimes the size of or smaller than a king-sized bed.
Oh, jeez.
Mm.
It is tiny, and it's horrible. It's inhumane. These people, they go absolutely crazy. So some of the things that people go through are panic attacks, mental breakdowns, paranoia, depression, and if they've been kept long enough, they will go through hallucinations, and they will start hallucinating in their cell, and they will go absolutely crazy. And the worst part about it is, it hasn't stopped. There are massive prisons called supermax prisons of only solitary confinement.
So it's basically legalized torture.
Yes,
Mm.
it's extremely inhumane. It's an absolutely horrible thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So here, this is a big conversation, and this is gonna take. I mean, maybe we can make this brief, but what do you guys think is the best alternative to this?
Just don't do it.
Well-
So okay.
Well,
so
I mean, the idea of it is
the idea of it is to isolate you for something that you've done in the
it's
prison.
punishment for punishment.
Yeah, but I mean, our prison system is so messed up already that you may as well just scrap it and start over from scratch.
But,
Yeah,
but
our-
what do you guys?
What
But-
alternatives? I guess is what Leo's saying is
Yeah.
is basically it should, if it's gone, it should have something to replace it. You can't, like, it's basically going to prison in prison. How do you go from there?
Like okay, here's the question: what is, both theoretically and practically, the best way to reform a person? That comes down to, that's kind of the basic idea.
Here's what I would say is, theoretically, if you ignore like ethics and ignore technology, the best way to reform someone would be essentially brainwashing. Like, that is not how we should. But if theoretically you wanted something that's going to be effective, that's going to work, is literally just a perfect form of brainwashing. Literally remove what is causing that. It's bad. I don't think that that's a
we
good
don't
idea.
have that though. Like, we
Yes.
can't do
but
that.
We,
So
that's that is what the government wants you to think.
oh God,
it's ethically, it's not an ethically stable solution.
Exactly.
I mean, you could even just put them into long-term therapy in intensive sessions.
Right.
Not to brainwash them, but to, like, get them to understand, and like I take the approach that you should educate before you punish.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
depending on the
Right.
crime, you should treat it differently.
Right.
So it's kind of similar to the whole imprisoning people for drug use.
Right.
Where like before they go into like rehab or anything, it's just immediate incarceration.
You're suggesting, like, teaching them to, like, on the negative effects or something?
No, like teach
No?
control.
Well, it has
Oh,
to. No,
yeah.
it has to do with. It has to do with
Right.
therapy, and it has to do with an intensive care like that. Meaning, helping somebody deal with these problems in a way, teaching them strategies to combat these issues like drug use.
Yeah.
Right.
In a proper manner. And of course, I am not an expert in this.
Yeah.
I can't say which way is the best, because people study this for their whole lives, and
Yeah.
I just think, like, what I've heard, I kind of I think that the best way to approach something, from drug use, but to even things like different crimes, is to kind of to teach, and is to reform, and is to kind of surround an individual with a caring environment, a place that they can learn, a place that they can consume information, read, learn, make art, just kind of find a way to think and to reflect in a meaningful way that doesn't include hurting them, meaning torturing them, subjecting them to such shame and such like, it causes mental pain.
Yeah, I mean there are prisons in the world that I think it's in Sweden, although don't quote me on that because I'm not sure.
It's always
Where
It's
there's, well,
always-
it's always Scandinavian or Holland.
Scandinavian countries.
Sorry, the Netherlands. But there is a maximum security prison out there where it's basically an apartment complex.
Okay, I've seen. Wait, did you watch Vice News about this?
No.
Okay, because
But-
I watched a Vice News piece about a Scandinavian country that had, like, a prison, quote unquote.
Well, it is a prison. It's in the middle of an island.
Well, this
and it's
was
like-
this was
but-
Azkaban.
No, that's in San Francisco. Oh, sorry.
Dude.
okay. The idea.
Not Azkaban. Sorry.
I saw something about, like,
You know what I meant.
I think it's
Alcatraz.
on, like, Vice
Alcatraz.
News, a video clip of, like, a housing complex away from a city where it's not like a prison. It's kind of just like an apartment or a house.
No.
Right.
Well, it's still a dedicated prison. It's in the middle of an island, and it's so you can't really escape even if you tried. But the whole point of the prison, while it's a maximum security
Is
prison,
more for reform rather than
it's-
containment.
it's for reform and for rehabilitation.
Right.
So they'll still have, like, they'll still have murderers and people who've done really serious crimes go there, but they'll try
They'll
and
treat them humanely.
they'll try and
Exactly.
make them a member of society. They won't try to break them down because of something they did. They'll try to get rid of whatever caused them to do that, whether that be mental illness or some other thing, and they'll try and get them back to a state where they could go back out into the world and be a completely normal human being.
Now, here's something interesting for that.
Whoa.
I just bring up because I thought it. I know it's interesting to us that there. I think that there's different definitions of normal, essentially, where you look around the world, and what I mean by that is, if you look in certain countries, there are based on groups of people, like there are things that some people are like, oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like maybe one thing's wrong, but like
Well, when I said normality,
Yeah.
I just meant like not a murderer.
No, I understand. What I mean to say is, I think it's interesting that we have different definitions of that based on where you go, and I'm not even talking about like a country's like oh, it's wrong if you're saying no to our choice, like what we're saying is correct.
Yeah.
I'm talking like something like murder or rape, like sometimes murder is generally taboo wherever, like just to
Oh,
humans,
yeah.
period. But there are some things that in Western countries we might say is like, that's wrong. That is something that you should go to prison over. But in other countries, it's like, oh, that's normal. There is not a problem with that. Like,
Yeah.
drug use might be something. There are some drugs that we think like you should not use that. That makes you dangerous to people,
Yeah.
dangerous to yourself. In like in essentially like let's say a third world country, there might be like a drug that here in like America and other Western countries is taboo for health reasons to both the person and the people around them.
Yeah.
Whereas like in a different country, it might be the sort of thing where it is, a part of their, it's ingrained in their culture. Like there might be like a dangerous hallucinogenic thing that's like, it's some sort of religious thing or something. Like that is interesting to me. It's completely off the topic, but
Yeah.
I just was interested when you were like, basically bring them back to society and what we think a normal person should be.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially. Elliot, do you have anything more to to say on this?
Yeah. So in my opinion, if we're not going to be taking away solitary confinement, it should only be for people on death row and the worst of the worst. I still think they shouldn't have to go through it.
People who there is not who we have basically said there's not a way to help them.
Yes. Those people, though I still don't think that they should have to be subjected to solitary confinement, because it's so inhumane. If people had to do it, I would say those people. The worst part is the prison guards. If they don't want to deal with LGBT, mentally disabled physically, people that they just don't want to deal with, they can throw them into solitary confinement without any reason.
So,
They can just be put in, no reason at all, not explained at all, just be thrown in, not have a choice, and that's that.
So
They're
what
in
you're saying
solitary
is
confinement.
basically it's not a particularly rule set guided. It is more a prison guards can unfairly treat people for whatever reason.
Yes.
That's not good at all. That's
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
So here's. Do you have anything extra, or should we have it? Ask a few more questions, then wrap it up.
I don't think so. I would just like to say there was
Oh, I did have one thing to say.
Here,
though.
Yeah.
You
let
do
Elliot.
know that actually a good number of people put on death row are wrongly convicted, right?
yes.
Okay.
There's actually one of the articles that I read for this. there was a person who spent 18 years on death row, including 10 in solitary confinement,
God.
for a murder he did not commit. So he saw somebody go into solitary confinement and go absolutely insane. He went in as a normal thinking person, obviously a criminal, but he was mentally sound. Like,
you mean a wrongly convicted criminal,
no,
from what you just said? Or?
I believe. So this guy who
He had
was
a criminal
wrongly
record?
convicted,
Yeah.
who was in solitary for 10 years, he saw somebody go into solitary confinement, and this inmate had he wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
You know, he'd done bad stuff. He was truly a criminal,
Okay.
but
He was mentally.
he was mentally sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
After, let's see if I can find it. In 3 years, this person had come in. Then after he was let out of solitary, he would go into the I'm getting this off the thing, so I'm quoting this article. He would go out into the recreation yard, get naked, lie down, urinate all over himself, and he would take his feces and smear it over his face.
Yeah.
He was crazy. He was out of his mind after only 3 years in solitary. It's that inhumane. It breaks people so quickly, and it is absolutely horrible.
So, I had a question. This is for all you guys. You're talking about reforming the entire prison system, which is, to me, I think that's a solution that is not easily obtainable. It's a
Nope,
Of course.
it's not, because
it-
prisons are
that-
privately run.
it is a best, like, it is something that is like that's the best case scenario in a utopian world. My question is, do you have, actually slightly more specifically to Elliot, who's done some research on this, do you have a suggestion on a more tangible solution, one that just deals with solitary confinement? What is a proper alternative? Like, what's something that's achievable? Is there an achievable alternative, or is it literally just there is not a good alternative? What are you going to do to the people who will not respond to who don't want to go through like reform, who actively are against bettering themselves for whatever reason? How are you going to respond to that when if there's someone who is against reforming themselves, who is being a disruption in a prison, who otherwise would go to solitary confinement? Is there how do you essentially punish them without being, what's an ethically sound version of that?
Well, I think that's a really heavy question, and I think I can't answer that question. I'm not sure if anybody here can. I think a
Even I
qualified
can't.
professional who has studied this for years
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
might be able to work on the theory of that, and it takes a lot of research into human nature. And
I don't think that it's something that needs to have a definitive answer. I just
Right.
think,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the question? Not an answer, just like, how
Yeah.
do you think one could go about solving it? What do you think is like a parameter or something?
Probably, I feel like a lot of education. I think maybe it could. I think therapy, would be a good. I know we've talked about therapy, but
Yeah.
meaning a more focused, maybe one-on-one with a professional, to kind of work through these problems, but also being able to have a conversation with maybe other prisoners to kind of work out.
Oh,
Here's
actually,
what I personally
Oh,
I
sorry.
think is an interesting combination. It's okay now. You want to just go
yeah,
ahead?
I'll just say mine's pretty quick.
Mhm.
If you turn the whole point of solitary confinement into just keeping somebody in a room, why don't you just make the room a little bit larger and stick 2 people in there, and because then that negates the whole going crazy because there's no social interaction thing. So if you just keep them locked in their cell without like being let out, but you still keep that social interaction, wouldn't that lessen the effects?
What if there's conflict between those two people?
Here's my suggestion is,
well, there's going to be conflict. There's conflict in all prisons between people,
I
so
mean,
that it
well,
wouldn't.
here's the idea is to avoid that conflict, is to basically punish them for that conflict.
Yeah.
I think that while it's good to try and avoid punishment, it is inevitable in this sort of situation. If you have someone who will not respond to something, Leo, you keep suggesting therapy, but here's the thing: I think that there are people who will not respond to that. There's people who may not want to reform. They think that they are morally and they are correct. They are supposed to be that they are not in the wrong, or if they do, they are not looking to change themselves. I think there are some people like that, sadly.
So
but
you're saying you want to force them to reform?
No, I'm saying what I'm saying is that not everyone's going to respond to therapy, and you need to have some sort of.
But then what? That's what I think. What is your alternative?
Well, that is my question. Could you combine the ideas in sort of a solitary confinement, but there is like, do you just say, let's put them in a slightly larger, let's make the rooms bigger and give them interaction, but limit the people who they interact with? Maybe they interact with like
family members.
They interact with like a trained professional or something.
Okay.
Like maybe they do interact with a therapist daily. Like let's say they have like 2 sessions a day, and that I don't like how it would. It still I think is somewhat torturous. You're forcing them to interact with that person. It's going to be the sort of thing where there's a little bit of breaking a person involved. You're not driving them insane. I don't think it's the most elegant solution, but I think that it's better than what we have.
I mean, trying to find a good solution to this problem is a really long, winding road. And I appreciate. I think I understand where you're coming from, and I agree, part of it. But this is a big conversation.
Yeah. Also, how could you use game theory to solve it?
God damn it.
Create a winning strategy to the prison system.
We're stopping. Perrin, cue us out. What? Okay.
So, on that note,
This is so
What a note.
depressing.
thank you for watching our.
Not watching, listening.
Perrin?
No, they're watching all right. They're staring at.
They're
their phones.
staring at the screen.
They're staring at the screen. It's still in their attention.
They are staring at the amazing artwork.
Do whatever it takes to keep listening. Hopefully, if you enjoyed this, I guess.
I want to take a moment. Elliot reminded
Like
me.
me
We have not
urging.
all acknowledged this in our episodes. We would like to thank our artist Nina Bedell for creating the artwork for our
Cover photo.
Cover photo. For
It's
our
so good.
podcast.
It's so great. We were so excited to actually get that
Yeah,
image. It was so fun.
It's so good.
Yeah, it makes like the production level like up here,
Because
you
from,
know,
like 0 to 100.
because we were just like, hey guys, let's do a podcast, and then it got real, and we were like, yes, let's make art, and like, well, let's actually get somebody to make art who is very good at it. It's a great thing. Thank you so much to everybody who's helped us. in
Yes.
this
So
process.
thank you
It's
to
really fun.
everyone involved, especially Nina. That is it for today. This has been
Another thanks to my cactus over there for supporting me through this discussion.
I would just
Support
like to say I have had so much fun working on this podcast, and I just want to thank the 3 of you, especially Perrin, for the one who initiated this. I've just
Why don't
had
you
so
just
much
thank
fun.
yourself? Why can't you just be
No.
like, thanks to the 4 of us?
So
Yes.
Woo.
Thanks, Elliot.
thank you, Elliot, but I really want to wrap this up.
Yeah.
All right, bonsai.
I'm sorry. We're sorry for this extra long version. Hopefully you stuck through all of it. I have been Perrin. I've been here with Leo
Elliot.
Yes, you have
Elliot.
been Perrin.
and
Okay.
Nalin.
Bye.
Thank you for
Bye.
listening to A Walk in the Woods.